When you read through history's great religious texts, you find these epic figures, right? Heroes, prophets, kings. They cast these incredibly long shadows. But what if I told you about a figure who is the shadow? A ghost who just appears for a moment, completely changes the course of history, and then vanishes. Gone, leaving behind a puzzle that has kept people guessing for thousands of years. Well, today, we're diving deep into one of the biggest enigmas ever, Melchizedek. So really, who was this guy, Melchizedek? The name might ring a bell, but you probably can't place him. And that's the whole point. His appearance in the ancient scriptures is so brief, it's almost a cameo. But believe me, the impact he had, it was absolutely massive. It's like he came from nowhere, but his influence is everywhere. Just think about this for a second. We're talking about the Bible, a collection of books that is completely obsessed with who's related to whom, begets this, begets that, you know the deal. And then this guy shows up for, get this, 3 verses. Just 3. And in those 3 verses, we learn he has no father, no mother, no family tree at all. He just strolls onto the world stage, does something incredibly important, and then poof, he's gone, like a ghost. And right here, this is the moment, this is the entire interaction. You've got the patriarch Abraham, fresh off a major military win, and suddenly he's met by this guy, Melchizedek. He's the king of a city called Salem, and he brings out bread and wine. He gives Abraham a blessing, and the text calls him a priest of God Most High. And that's it. That one tiny meeting would ripple through time, creating a theological puzzle that people would spend the next few thousand years trying to figure out. Okay, so that one little encounter, it lit a fuse. A debate started that would literally shape the future of a whole new religion. You see, the first big attempt to solve the Melchizedek puzzle wasn't just some intellectual exercise. No, it was a practical solution to a huge problem that early Christianity was facing. Let's call this the official story. So here was the big hang-up. In ancient Jewish law, you had these 2 very separate jobs, king and priest. You couldn't be both. It was like a rule. Kings came from the tribe of Judah. That's King David's line. But priests, they had to come from the tribe of Levi. It was a bloodline thing. So along comes Jesus, who was hailed as the king from Judah. That fits. But his followers also called him the ultimate high priest. See the problem? How could he be both if he wasn't from the right tribe? So you've got these 2 competing models. On one hand, there's the Levitical priesthood. It's a closed club, totally based on your family tree and the law of Moses. But then you have Melchizedek. He's this mysterious figure who is somehow both a king and a priest way before the law of Moses was even a thing. He represents a totally different kind of authority. It's not about who your dad was, it's about being chosen directly by God. Then, centuries later, this clue pops up in the book of Psalms. It's a game changer. It's a prophecy about a future king, one from David's line, who will also be a priest, but not like the other priests. He'll be a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Ding, ding, ding! For early Christians, this was it. This was the key they were looking for to solve their big problem. And this all comes together in the New Testament, in the letter to the Hebrews. The writer basically connects all the dots. They make this brilliant argument that Melchizedek, this ancient king, created a precedent. He established a higher, older, better kind of priesthood. And this allowed them to say, see, Jesus is the ultimate high priest, not because of his family tree, but because God appointed him, just like Melchizedek. And for them, boom, problem solved, case closed. Or was it? Because for a whole other group of people, the story was just getting interesting. Right. So while that official story was being written into the history books, something else was happening in the shadows. A totally different story about Melchizedek was being passed around in secret. A forbidden story. One that came from texts that were eventually hunted down and ordered to be burned. And in this version, Melchizedek wasn't just a man. He was something else entirely. Fast forward to the 20th century. Archeologists make these mind-blowing discoveries. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt. And what they find is a treasure trove of these lost, forbidden books. And guess who shows up in them? Our guy, Melchizedek. But this is a version of him the official story wouldn't even recognize. We're talking about a cosmic being with incredible power. Now, a lot of these texts came from groups we now call the Gnostics, and their whole worldview was, well, it was out there. The Matrix is a good way to think about it. They believed our physical world wasn't the real deal. They thought it was a flawed creation, kind of like a prison, run by a lesser, flawed God. The only way to escape was through gnosis. that's Greek for knowledge. Special, secret knowledge delivered by messengers from the true, perfect reality. And guess who one of their most important heavenly messengers was? Yep, Melchizedek. In these Gnostic texts, he gets a major promotion. He's not just some ancient priest king anymore. Oh no, he's a heavenly judge. He's an end times warrior who fights the forces of darkness. He's an angelic being, the one who reveals the divine secrets you need for salvation. This isn't just tweaking the story a little bit. This is a complete, top-to-bottom reinvention. Okay, so let's just pause here for a second. We now have two completely different versions of the same guy. On one side, a righteous priest king who offers a blessing. On the other, a cosmic warrior angel who battles demons. How can one person be both? Which one is the real Melchizedek? Well, it turns out asking which one is real might just be the wrong question to ask. To really get to the bottom of this, we have to step outside of just reading old texts. We need to look at something bigger: how we as groups of people remember the past. Because the real story here isn't about finding the real man. It's about a battle for his memory. There's a fascinating concept for this, and scholars call it social memory. The best way to think about it is like this. Think about the founding story of your country. That story isn't just a dry list of facts, right? It's a narrative. And that narrative changes over time to fit what's important to people in the present. The past isn't set in stone. It's a story we're always telling ourselves, and we're always editing it to make sense of the world we live in right now. And the story of Melchizedek is a perfect example of how this works. Step 1, you start with a mysterious, vaguely defined figure from the past. You know, like our guy from Genesis. Step 2, a community, years later, has a problem or a need. Maybe they need to justify a new kind of priest, or maybe they need a cosmic hero to give them hope. Step 3, they look back at that mysterious figure and see him as a blank canvas. And finally, step 4, they repaint that canvas. They reinterpret him to fit their current needs, and in doing so, they create a whole new tradition. So you see, the very thing that makes Melchizedek so mysterious, the fact that we know almost nothing about him, that's what made him so powerful. His lack of a backstory was his greatest asset. His silence in the original text basically gave everyone else permission to speak for him. The early Christians needed a new kind of priest, so he became one. The Gnostics needed a cosmic hero, so he became one. He wasn't really a character anymore, he was a canvas. But hold on, the rabbit hole goes even deeper. We've seen how all these later groups remade Melchizedek to fit their own needs. But what if the story we started with, the one in Genesis, was already a rewrite? What if it wasn't the original story at all? Okay, get ready for this because it's a wild one. Some biblical scholars now have a theory that in the original, oldest version of the story, Melchizedek wasn't the king of Salem, which means peace and is linked to Jerusalem. No, they think the text originally said he was the king of Sodom. Yeah, that Sodom. The theory goes that much later, after Sodom got its terrible reputation, scribes editing the text changed the name. Why? To protect their hero Abraham's reputation. They didn't want him hanging out with a king of a city that was a byword for sin, so the process of rewriting memory might have been happening from the very, very beginning. So, after all that, where are we? We've chased this historical ghost all the way from Genesis, through the secret text of the Gnostics, and right back to a tiny little word that might have been changed by a scribe thousands of years ago. And I think the real takeaway here is that the mystery of Melchizedek was never about finding the one true identity of a single man. It's really about us. It shows us that these huge figures from our shared past aren't like statues frozen in time. They're more like living symbols, like clay, that every new generation picks up and reshapes to reflect his own dreams, its own anxieties, and what it needs to believe. And that really leaves us with one last big question, doesn't it? If the story of a man who shows up for just 3 verses can be twisted and turned into so many different things, well, it makes you wonder, which other famous figures from history might not be quite what we think they are? Maybe the stories we tell about the past are really just stories about ourselves. Peeling back the layers of a story like this one has been a real journey into history and memory. I just want to say thank you so much for coming along with me to explore one of history's most fascinating puzzles. It's your curiosity that makes putting these explainers together so rewarding. Thanks for being here.